The kitchen is one of these areas in the household that can clutter up the fastest. But it doesn't have to be that way. I have been living a minimalist lifestyle for the past 7 years, and no matter if I was living by myself, with my partner, or in shared apartments, I've always managed to keep the kitchen clean, organized, and minimal. So in today's video, I share my very best tips with you all. My tip number 1 is to declutter the pans and not the lids. What I see in so many kitchens is this giant pile of pans with random lids everywhere. And every time someone wants to cook, it turns into a puzzle game. But let's think about this for a second. You probably have 4 stovetops. So why should you own 10 pans? Pans are super quickly to wash by hands, and most of them are multifunctional anyways. These are the ones that I think actually matters. A sauté pan or a frying pan with higher edges. This is the one unbeatable pan. You can fry things in it, make one-pot meals, even cook rice in it. I'd recommend getting a slightly bigger one so you can cook larger portions. Then a normal pot where you can cook things like pasta. And personally, we also own a very flat frying pans if we want to fry things separately on high heat. And then we also own a second pot. Just because smaller amounts of water are more energy efficient in a smaller pot, while a bigger one is more practical for guests or for larger meals. And because we only own this amount, every pan can just be stored with the lid directly on top. So instead of organizing too many pans, just own fewer pans. 2 are enough. 4 is comfortable. More than that is usually unnecessary. My tip number 2 is that you probably don't need a knife block. I see these giant knife blocks in people's kitchen all the time, and I'm always wondering if they're secretly professional chefs. Because honestly, I basically use one knife for everything. It is this small black Victorinox knives, and I even used it back when I had an Instagram account where I shared so many recipes. I even wrote a cookbook with this one single knife. Though one thing I had to learn when I moved in with my husband. He is not a vegetarian, so I learned that in order to cut meat, you sometimes need a second one with one of these blades. So that's why we now have one of these as well. But a knife block with 10 different knives for all the occasions that are probably never gonna happen, I don't think that's necessary, and it's definitely one thing you can declutter. Talking about knife blocks, I anyway don't think it's necessary. We just store those knives inside of the drawers. That way the countertop stays clear, which makes it so much easier for cleaning. Tip number 3 is that 1 mug per person is enough. I think mugs are one of the biggest clutter categories in many people's kitchens. Sometimes I see like 40 mugs in people's houses, and I always wonder how many cups of coffee a person can physically drink in a day. We personally own 1 mug for each person, so 2. Mine is one color, and then my husband's is a different color. So everyone always knows which one is theirs. What I noticed for many people that own more mugs is that they take a new mug for every single coffee, which also fills up the dishwasher insanely fast, which feels so unnecessary. And honestly, a mug takes like 5 seconds to rinse. So we like to keep it simple. And if you're worried about guests, you can keep maybe like 2 extra mugs somewhere in the storage, but not in daily use. Because daily life just gets so much easier when everyone has 1 mug, uses it, rinses it, and puts it back. The tip number 4 is to stop buying ingredients just for one recipe. Instead, we pick 1 or 2 cuisines that we always like to cook. For us, it's mostly Italian food that we prefer. So we always have things like pasta, rice, olive oil, canned tomatoes, the basics that we constantly use. I've definitely had phases where I suddenly wanted to cook, Japanese recipes, Indian recipes. Actually, just recently I bought this kombu because I wanted to make a Japanese curry, but then it never happened and it still sits in my pantry. So instead, whenever we want to try a new cuisine, we'd rather do that in a restaurant. They already have everything there, it's gonna cook very authentic, and I try to just perfectionize my Italian cooking skills. Tip number 5. Skip the spice mixes. What I really try to avoid is buying these super specific spice mixes. For example, pasta seasoning, fish seasoning, salad seasoning, etc. Instead, I just learned how spices work together and just keep the basics at home. For example, pepper, salt, vegetable stock, smoked paprika, chili, oregano, etc. And then we also use lots of fresh herbs. Honestly, fresh herbs I think is one of the only things that is actually worth it to grow them yourself. We always keep things like oregano, basil, chives in the garden. And with that alone, you can already make so many things taste so amazing. Because most of these pre-made spice mixes, they're honestly just flavor enhancers with a bit of garlic powder and some very basic spices mixed in. Do you guys have any spices that you use over and over again and are so worth to have in your cupboard? Please let me know down in the comments. Tip number 6 is to use the appliances that you already have. Here's one example. I would love to own an air fryer. I would probably use it every day. But I don't own one because I already have an oven and a microwave built into my kitchen. If I would own an air fryer, it would always live on the countertop and steal me all my space that I need for cooking. So I decided to not buy one. And yes, I hear people saying, but it's more energy efficient to use an air fryer instead of an oven. But I think we have to zoom out a little bit because an oven is amazing too. You just have to learn how to work with it the right way. So instead of making tiny meals in an air fryer every day, I just make an oven casserole, a bake, or something on the tray. There is so many options that I can make. It just gives me bigger portions, but that's also great because I can eat it over a couple of days. Just because social media convinced you to save 200 air fryer recipes, it doesn't mean you have to buy one. That is just marketing. Tip number 7. The simpler the tools, the smarter you become. This is something I genuinely believe in. The simpler the tools, but also the ingredients are that you use in your kitchen, the more creative your brain has to be. And that is very good for long-term brain health. Because if everything is pre-made, automated, pre-cut, we stop thinking creatively. So instead, I like to challenge myself to create new meals out of simple ingredients and the tools that I already have. So let's say you only have cabbage at home. Can you think of multiple very creative ways on how to use it in the next couple of days? There's so many cool cabbage recipes out there. You just have to do your research based on what you already have at home. This mindset honestly keeps cooking so fun for me. I actually once made a little checklist on how to be creative with simple ingredients, how different tastes go together, but also textures. I will link it down below. You can download it for free and start being creative in the kitchen so you can also enhance your creative thinking. Tip number 8 is to shop more often, but to buy less. And this is probably one of the biggest reasons why our kitchen stays so minimal. I personally don't love these big giant weekly grocery hauls because most of the time life changes. Maybe we get invited somewhere, maybe we are traveling, maybe I'm suddenly not really hungry for what I've planned. And then the food just goes bad. So instead, we usually just shop for a few days at a time. That way we can stretch the meals naturally if we need without overflowing the pantry and the fridge. We also have a very small fridge, and at first I thought, oh my god, how are we gonna survive with it? But it's actually amazing because you automatically become so much more intentional with what you buy. And we also always know what we have at home. I know that many of you guys are also living minimalistic, and I would be interested, how do you do your groceries? Do you also do more small batches frequently, or do you like the weekly grocery hauls? Let me know down in the comments. Tip number 9 is to keep the counters empty. And this is probably one of my biggest kitchen rules. I really try to keep all our counters empty per default. You can see that we have one exception. It's my husband's coffee machine. It's very important for him. He really likes to keep it here, and he takes care of it every day. It's always nice and clean. So I personally don't mind. But beside that, I just try to keep as little as possible on the counter, because I feel like as soon as one thing sits here, other things starts to clutter around it and it piles up. Additionally, the kitchen always gets dirty so fast. But if the surfaces are mostly empty, it's just so easy to quickly wipe them down. And then cleaning doesn't become this exhausting thing that you have to do once per week and it takes away all of your time. I just quickly do it each night and the kitchen is always clean. The last tip for a minimal kitchen, tip number 10, is that organizers are usually just clutter for you clutter. Because most of the time, the real issue is not organization. It's just that you own too much. So instead of buying more organizers, I would really advise you to simplify your kitchen, to really declutter what you don't need. If you truly need a container, you can simply recycle an old food container instead of buying something new. That honestly works perfectly fine most of the time. So before trying to organize things endlessly, just try to declutter. I know that many of you guys are also fellow minimalists, so please let me know down in the comments if you have any other ways that you keep your kitchen minimally. I would really love to read that. I talk to you guys soon. Bye!